And now we get into the personal care products and obviously
Exactly.
cleaning products that most households have, right?
Listen, the personal care product blew my mind.
Yeah, blew
and
my
I have
mind.
in my head, you guys know that commercial. I can say the name, Axe. The young guy who put Axe on, right? And then Axe, and then now he gets the girls, he's dancing.
Yeah.
What's in Axe?
Yeah.
All toxin, fragrances, alkyl phenols, right? Phthalates, all of this. And then you do that all day long.
All day long.
You spray it.
No.
The studies show your testosterone goes down. So the Axe commercial should be, the skin is doing all this, whoop, and then no erection, no problem, it doesn't get the girl. So tell me about personal care products, because that was a big one for me.
It's one of the top sources of estrogen. Daily estrogen exposures that people have are estrogenic exposures. The fragrances. In America, you're allowed to use the term fragrance and not tell people what's in there. You can kind of use it to hide a lot of these petroleum-based chemicals. These are petroleum-based chemicals, right? Most of these artificial estrogens. That's because they're cheap. I mean, you can literally buy truckloads of these things, kilograms of these things for next to nothing. And so, the big one you see in personal care is parabens and phthalates. They use them. Even the FDA has a list of the personal care products with phthalates. And again, phthalates is a class of chemicals. It's not just one thing. It's a whole class. There's hundreds of phthalates. There's hundreds of parabens. There's methylparaben, there's propylparaben, there's butylparaben. You see, there's hundreds of them.
Right.
And they, not only do the parabens and the phthalates act like estrogen, but once they get into your body starts to break them down. And even the breakdown products have been known to act like estrogen. So sometimes it's not as simple as just studying the parent chemical that you're putting into your system. Sometimes you have to go and study the breakdown product. I think the problem is, they do they sometimes do studies, but sunscreen is an example of a chemical where they didn't even do the studies. Oxybenzone is found in 95% of sunscreens in America. You go to Walmart and you look at the sunscreens, you're gonna find oxybenzone, and it's hard not to. I do this. This is why I know I need sunscreen. I go there and I'm looking and I'm like, man, they all have oxybenzone. They did a study after I published my book, unfortunately, because I would have had this in the book, but they did one application of sunscreen. 7 days later, it was still above the government's safety limits.
The FDA director came out and said something about it.
Exactly. He was negative about it. He was saying, why didn't we do these studies 20 years ago? This has been illegal for 20, 30 years.
30 years. Oh.
And again, this comes back to the toxicology that you guys talk about, that even the small amounts can be in your body 7 days later in levels that are alarming.
Well, and this was cancer-causing levels. I mean, this was outrageously high levels. And I'm even worried about the low levels that are disrupting hormones. So once you start getting into the cancer-causing levels, I mean, that's a real red flag.
And the sunscreen is a big one, because it's not just when you go to the beach. I mean, we're told by so many dermatologists, and even we just came back from a conference where one of their advices is you should be wearing, in terms of aesthetics, you should be wearing sunscreen every day, 3 times a day.
Oh no.
But, and Doc yelled out, what about the benzoin? And they looked at him like,
Yeah. So again, to be clear, we're not telling people don't put sunscreen on, because there's no questions that the rates of skin cancers have gone up, the rates of melanoma have gone up. So we're not saying don't use.
Yeah, don't go out and get burned, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but there's good sunscreens and there's bad sunscreens.
So, for example, one thing, again, talking about skincare products. First, the skin is the biggest organ.
Yep.
This is where we put everything. So this is where we get a lot of our exposure. It's not just the food. So
an easy exposure, right?
Yeah,
because one of the things with the interesting thing about sunscreen is when it actually gets exposed to UV light, it almost intensifies the effect.
It can,
right?
yeah. Oh yeah, exactly.
So I have a great anecdote. I like to talk about this about sunscreen. So I went to Hawaii with my family, and I had my nice, high-end, quote-unquote, sunblock. And when you go there, they tell you, no, you cannot use this. I'm like, all right. And they told me it's because it bleaches the corals. I'm like, okay, no problem. So you put a zinc-based sunblock. It sucks, by the way. Can barely get in.
White.
They are getting better. It stays white, but they are getting better at this. But we put it. Then I went and did my research. So it's not just that it bleaches the corals, and you have that in your book. That chemical oxybenzone has been shown to cause infertility in the zebrafish that helps build the corals. So you showed very nicely the population of zebrafish. After you get them exposed to a certain amount of chemicals, oxybenzone, you don't have as much fish to maintain the coral reef. So my point was, They're worried about the fertility of zebrafish. What about me?
Right.
I'm putting this thing on every day. We're not relevant. What's going on?
And you made a great point about it. You know, it took the environmentalists, right, to come out and do these demonstrations against the coral reefs, but it's like, what about us? What about our kids? That we're laddering up with these products.
So skincare products, how do we get exposed to them? Lotions,
soap,
liquid
soaps.
liquid
you
soap.
think you're washing it off? The
Toothpaste.
stuff prefers to stay on your skin, right? I mean, your skin is fatty. Think about eating chicken skins, right? They're fatty.
Right.
This stuff soaks through your skin. It doesn't want to wash off in the water. These are oily substances, just like your hormones are oily substances. So
moisturizers,
literally anything you're putting on your skin.
on your skin. So really important. Fragrances. Talking about fragrances, one that also messed me
Deodorant.
up.
I mean, this is a big sort of like absorbing area, and men are putting deodorant on every day, twice a day, and absorbing this stuff through their armpits.
Yeah, so that's scary. So practical advice, and we're gonna go at the end of this talk to talk about what we should do. But skincare products are a big one.
It's a big one.
Let me tell you something else that blew my mind. What we breathe. Candles. You're taking away my candles, my scented candles.
Our wives are big
My
on
God,
candles.
we love scented candles.
There's a lot of good essential oils out there that you can use to replace a lot of these petroleum-based fragrances, like tangerine oil, great stuff, right? Like there's good fragrances. But how many products have those?
Yeah.
Big question
So
mark.
but first, tell us, why are scented candles bad for us? Why are air fresheners bad for us?
Well, think about if you have asthma and you've got an inhaler, right? Your lungs are an awesome delivery tool for pulling drugs into your system. Same with the artificial estrogens. I mean, you're breathing these things in, your lungs are delivering them to your body. And this is true of the plastic chemicals too. If you have a lot of plastics, especially if you're heating them up, like your really hot car. And by the way, they have oxybenzone in cars. They put oxybenzone in the plastics to protect against the sun.
Like it's sun protector.
It's a new car smell, right?
It's a new car smell, and people are attracted to it.
I used to love that.
People are
car
attracted
smell.
to it, right? Because it tricks your brain. Your brain thinks it's like a sexual attractant.
Yeah.
And so people are like, oh, I love the new car smell, but it's actually a perverse thing that's happening in your brain. It's disruptive, and it's thousands of years of evolution and things. Our brains think it's estrogen, and we're tricked.
Oh my
and we don't have these exposures. We shouldn't have these exposures, right? I mean, our ancestors were never exposed to these chemicals.
Right.
So they're causing a lot more hormone disruption than people realize. But yeah, the plastics, even in the air. Like another one that's big is the masks. If you get these plastic masks, like some masks don't have plastic, some of them do. A lot of them are made from polyester. Polyester is technically called polyethylene terephthalate.
Wow.
Keyword being phthalate, right?
You're breathing
in a lot of these microplastics, and sure enough, the recent research now with a lot more mask wearing shows a lot more microplastics in your lungs, a lot more phthalates in your bloodstream. Wow. So
you showed a study that in women who use perfume, it increased 163%. What specifically?
In their fetus and in their umbilical.
Versus people phthalates, right?
Phthalates and parabens, yeah.
Well, let me talk about phthalates first.
Yeah.
I learned that through your book. First, the way they spell it.
Yeah.
Who spells that?
Yeah.
It's PHCHALATE. I don't want to say phthalates. So you don't pronounce the PH, it's just phthalates. So, one thing I learned in your book, phthalates are the chemicals that humans are the most in contact with.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yeah.
So I remember there was a study that they tried doing. They wanted a control group. So the way they do studies, randomized control, they put one that has the problem, one that doesn't. They could not find people in America that had zero phthalate exposure.
No.
They had to go to Alaska and get a tribe. So and there's a new study that came out that they checked the urine levels of 80+% of people in America, and it's positive for phthalates, positive for atrazine. So you think about it, phthalates is the one that we're most in contact with, whether we breathe it, it's in the plastic, we put it on our skins. In phthalates, there's one statement that you quoted it. Phthalates is a direct anti-testosterone compound.
Yep.
So phthalates, it causes cancer, it causes all those things, but phthalates, when it comes to testosterone, that's the one of the most destructive estrogenic.
Is that the one also that when we turn on the AC in the car and it's really hot, it's phthalates coming out?
Oh yeah,
That's usually,
exactly.
So turning on the air while it's really hot, you're breathing
air out the car.
Oh, and by the way, to all you Starbucks drinkers, right? Pouring hot water into a Starbucks
paper
cup that has
Or any paper
plastic
cup in
coating
general.
inside of it, not only raises the amount of estrogen, but it's incredible that when you add caffeine, it intensifies it. So it's not just the hot water, it's the actual caffeine product that also intensifies the estrogenic effect. So all you coffee drinkers, Starbucks, be very mindful of
Take
this.
your own glass
Take
bottle
your
or
own metal
stainless
bottle,
steel,
yeah.
right? You're beyond that one.
Stainless and glass, yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to do a quick sum up of where we are. And again, I'm following your book. So we've learned today a lot about, we learned a lot of toxic chemicals, names that are difficult. So let's kind of put them in order. Number one was the birth control pills. Birth control, the equine estrogen, fake estrogen that we find it's in the water everywhere. So we got to be careful with this. Number two, phthalates, that weird sounding name that we found in plastics, that we get exposed to on our skin, that we breathe it, we eat it. Then you have the sunscreen estrogen, oxybenzone, 4-MBC. I'm starting to learn those. Then you have the fragrance, something like what you put in soaps, in fragrances, in perfumes, deodorants. Then you talked in your book, we didn't talk too much about it, it's about artificial colors.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, red dyes.
Red 3
Red
and
dyes.
red 4.
Red 4, yeah.
So associated with ADHD and those problems.
Even fingernail paints, right?
Polish.
Polish
polish.
that women put on their nails.
Sure. It probably doesn't,
And they
probably
put
doesn't
it,
leach in through
They
the
put it
nail.
under the heat. And they have plastic on it. Yeah, so.
Yeah, no, with women it's worse.
Yeah.
BPA, we talked about BPA and
BPS.
BPS.
Yep, plastic.
Right? So a lot of big names for our viewers. Really, I've read your book so many times. I'm educating myself about this, and I'm going to say something. Most places, most colleagues, most friends, when I start talking about this, it is a doom and gloom conversation. You've taken away my scented candles. You've taken away my Axe perfume. You've
Starbucks.
taken away my Starbucks. But I think the message to all this.
Drinking water out of plastic bottles. That's
It's taken. But I think the big message we have for our customers, for our viewers. Number one, we need to talk about this.
Yeah.
We need to be aware. If you don't know, you just want change. Second, don't be overwhelmed. It is a lot of information and it is scary. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
What I've realized, there's no way you can be at 0% exposure. But what we're doing today is helping you
Minimize.
be aware of
Minimize
it.
exposure.
And how can we minimize, even if you decrease your toxin load by 5%, by doing a few other things we're going to talk, it's worth it.
Yeah.
And once enough people talk about this, my goal is that eventually
have change.
universities are talking about this. People are recognizing all the research that's been done, and there needs to be policy changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is what we're trying to do here.
No, and if you made a 90-day change, as you said on one of the YouTube videos that I've seen you, just making a 90-day change, a hardcore change, or just trying to avoid as much as you can these chemicals can have a really big impact on your health without you noticing.
Yeah, a lot of people, and you can use testosterone to measure this too. A lot of people, because you can't measure BPA in a clinical lab, you can do it as a researcher like myself, but phthalates, BPA, parabens, it's hard to be measuring these nanogram levels, and it's complicated, and the clinics don't care, right? They're not motivated, they aren't making money to measure how much BPA you have.
Right.
One of the proxies you can use is testosterone. Measure your total testosterone, measure your free testosterone. Those two things go down with estrogen exposures. And then you can measure your SHBG also. That goes up with estrogen exposures. So you can track these things with those blood tests. The other thing that's worth mentioning is just on the topic of testosterone disruption. Your total and your free are going down. Your SHBG is disrupted. The receptor numbers go down. The actual ability to take testosterone and for your body to use it, that gets altered through these chemicals. And the other thing is you can block binding to the testosterone receptor gets blocked. The analogy I always use is hockey because I come from Minnesota. And blocking a receptor is like blocking a goal in hockey. If you put a piece of plywood in front of a hockey goal, it doesn't matter how many pucks you have on the ice, how many players you have on the ice shooting at the goal. If you have a piece of plywood in front of the goal, you're not scoring any goals. It doesn't matter how good your testosterone levels look on a blood test. If you're blocking binding to the receptor, it's not going to have an impact, and that's called testosterone resistance. A lot of people don't understand what that means without a simple analogy like the hockey receptor or the hockey goal, but that's what's happening. You get 5 different points of contact with testosterone disruption just from these estrogens.
Well, I think the best way to understand it is insulin resistance.
It's like insulin resistance.
If you're consuming too much sugar, your cells become resistant. Same thing here with the estrogenics. Your cells are becoming resistant to actually absorbing the testosterone.
Yep.
So listen, so I think this has been great. And I think I'm gonna, again, do a quick sum up. I think we're gonna take a break. So far, what have we learned? We know what estrogenics mean. We know how bad they are. We know how ubiquitous they are. They are everywhere. And we're starting to see what they can do. I think we're gonna take a quick break. And then when we come back, what I wanna talk about is the diseases associated with all of those toxins. And then we'll finish with a positive note. What can we do about it? Because for me, I always wanna know that I'm in control. Although the world around me is crumbling, there's things that I can do to really help change my health, and I'm in control.
Yeah. And
So
I
I
think that one of our goals too is to empower you, right? And you've laid it out really well. When you feel powerless to change, or that you are not in control of your environment, or that there's nothing that you can do, then you become, it's disheartening, right? You kind of put your head in the sand and you say, oh, you know what? I'll just give up. It is what it is, right?
So when we come back, this is what we're gonna go over. We're gonna go over the diseases that are associated with this and what can we do to protect ourselves.
Stay tuned.